This is Bruce Winston. Welcome back to the video series on the terminal values that we discovered in our New Testament-based organizational spirituality three-phase study. In this video, we'll cover another 4 of the terminal values. The first value is commitment. Dayton, while studying Colossians 3:23-24, which is about work and leadership, produced 4 principles that included leaders must acknowledge and cultivate a worker's purpose for commitment to working for an organization. Whalen and I, in the second phase, after reviewing Dayton's principles, altered Dayton's principle to leaders cultivate commitment in workers. Whalen and I, after our qualitative study, produced the scale development item, my leader focuses on employee development toward accomplishing the organization's mission. Dr. Gilbert and I, in Phase 3, values coded the principle and scale development item as a terminal value of commitment. Moade et al. Wrote this as the definition for commitment: the relative strength of an individual's identification with and involvement in a particular organization. Conceptually, it can be characterized by at least 3 factors: a strong belief in and acceptance of the organization's goals and values, a willingness to exert considerable effort on behalf of the organization, and a strong desire to maintain membership in that organization. When organizational commitment is defined in this fashion, it represents something beyond mere passive loyalty to an organization. It involves an active relationship with the organization such that individuals are willing to give something of themselves in order to contribute to the organization's well-being. This is somewhat similar to Aristotle's concept of complete friendship that I mentioned in an earlier video. While Aristotle talked about friendship and then talked about complete friendship, they are not distinct, discrete categories, but rather they're on a continuum. At the lower end of involvement and commitment, friendship is passive. It is recognizing people. You would call them friends, but would not call them good friends. Then it progresses up to the highest level of intensity, which would be probably close to wanting to marry your spouse. You would be completely committed to the person and seek to improve and help that person accomplish what that person wishes to do. This might be considered as loving the organization. Where this terminal value exists, people have a sense of belonging. They experience a greater sense of engagement with their work and have personal well-being and flourish. The next value is concern for others. Pickwell, while studying 1 Peter 5:1-11, which was about church elders leading and shepherding church members in a hostile environment, derived the principle: leaders demonstrate attentiveness towards others during a crisis. Serrano, while studying Acts 4:34-37 in Phase 1, which was about the role of the community organization in caring for members of the church, derived the principles: spiritual organizations take risks for the greater good, and spiritual organizations take care of their members. In Phase 2, Titone combined Pickwell's and Serrano's principles into 8 principles that included leaders have concern for the greater good, and leaders have concern for followers during a crisis. She developed 2 instrumental values. My leader demonstrates a focus on others rather than a focus on self. My leader demonstrates attentiveness towards others during a crisis. Dr. Gilbert and I, in Phase 3, values coded the principles and scale development items as a terminal value of concern for others. An anonymous source posited the importance of religious values in social care. The anonymous author said, human beings cannot live alone. It's only by virtue, by their capacity to build communal ties, that they are able to survive, a fact that applies in particular to the domain of social welfare and care. Concern for others is similar to the concepts of phileo and storge, the biblical Greek words for love of family, brotherly love, and motherly love for a child, which is treated as a terminal value in which there is a common belief among organizational members that the care for others is tantamount for communal living within an organization. This also ties into Aristotle's concept of the need for community because Aristotle posited that people, humans, are social and need to have interaction with others for well-being. I mentioned Greenleaf's best test of servant leadership in an earlier video, and here it applies as well. Greenleaf said that the best test of a servant leader, and difficult to administer, is do these served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants? And what is the effect on the least privileged in society? Will they benefit or at least not be further deprived? Where the terminal value of concern for others exists, people sense peace, safety, and support. They have resources needed to achieve short-term and long-term goals, and they have personal well-being and flourishing. As we work through the videos, I encourage you to consider how these outcomes are repeated. That's a condition that occurs when all of these values are highly correlated. They're all focusing on the underlying concept of agape in terms of the terminal values and agapao love in terms of the instrumental values. An example comes from my experience at Regent University many years ago. While I was understanding and studying the Beatitudes, I recognized this need to care for others in ways that perhaps would not be typical in an organization. There were several women, mothers, working in the department where I was, and I knew we were approaching the end of the academic school year for primary and secondary schools. And reluctantly, quite frankly, I was really concerned about this. I went out and talked to all of the mothers and said, I realize we're coming to the end of the school year. Your children are going to be home for the summer, and that may be a concern for you in terms of care or other things. And I just want to know, what can we do in this organization that would make it better for you, your children, and your overall family? And again, I was doing this with very much intrepidation. I'm not sure what I was going to hear. And surprisingly, they came back with some very interesting and doable solutions. Now, there was nothing in the work that these mothers did that required instant response or specific response during specific times of the day. One mother asked to come into work earlier so that she could be home more around 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because her husband would take care of the child in the morning and she would then take care of the child in the afternoon. Another mother asked for the exact opposite because she was also sharing caretaking with her spouse for her child. The third that talked to me had something different. She wanted to work more hours Monday through Thursday and take Friday off. And her reason for that is that she had never been able to spend, in her mind, enough time with her daughter and wanted to have one day a week where it would just be she and her daughter, and they could do the things that she and her daughter wanted to do. We started that, and I didn't notice any problems. A word got out to somebody somehow that we were doing this test, and one of the senior executives stopped by my office, which they were all known to do. People would wander through and say hello, and he mentioned to me that he heard what I was doing. He said, it's very risky. And I said, yeah, I know. I realize my job may be on the line if this doesn't work. Surprisingly, it worked so well that, and I hesitate to say this, that at the end of the summer, one of the mothers decided to quit. Not because she didn't like what was going on. In fact, she praised what we did. But her spouse had taken a job in another city, and so they were relocating. The interesting thing was that when I mentioned to the other people in the office that I would be recruiting for a replacement, the mothers who were part of that summer test said, don't. We have improved our work processes so much this summer because we had a different way to work that we think we can continue doing all the work without replacing the person. So not only was there concern for others, there was a change in the organization because we adapted the organization to fit the employees, which is a tenet of servant leadership. We were able to improve efficiency and performance. So that's not to say that you should have concern for others simply because it is better for the organization. But when we care for others, then care for us, and that applies in the organizational setting. The next terminal value is development. Gregory, in phase 1, while studying 1 Corinthians 9:19 to 27, which is about cross-cultural leadership and influencing others, derived 7 principles, which included cross-cultural leaders who desire to be effective leaders will demonstrate an honest humility, which is perceived as such by their subordinate in a way they approach their leadership responsibilities and practices. Cross-cultural leaders who desire to be effective leaders will allow the mission and goals of their organization to inspire their behaviors, moving them past cultural boundaries, creating productive and lasting relationships with their subordinates. Also in phase 1, Hunt and Dobrik Weiss, studying Ephesians 4:1 to 16, which is about viewing organizational members as people and not just cogs in a machine, developed 4 principles that included organizational unity stems from members of the whole completing prescribed jobs with an understanding of and dedication to the functioning of the whole. Spiritual organizational leaders empower organizational members by modeling the call to serve in meaningful work, how to serve well, and dedication to serving others. In phase 2, Soji Schaffner condensed Gregory and Hunt Dobrik Weiss's principles into one principle: leaders foster purpose. And after her qualitative study, she produced the following scale development item: my leader demonstrates individual and collective perseverance to accomplish goals. Dr. Gilbert and I in phase 3 values coded the principles and scale development item as a terminal value of development. Development as a terminal value implies individual and collective interest in the continual growth of all people in the organization, tying back again to Aristotle's complete friendship, such that they are continuously learning, continuously taking on more complex tasks that require greater insight into the problems and solutions. Everyone in the organization would have the end state of all people being qualified to complete problem-solving tasks and leading others to solve problems. According to Hertz and Williams, this terminal value relates to Fishbane and Ajin's theory of reasoned action and Ajin's theory of planned behavior. Where development as a terminal value exists, people report having a sense of self-efficacy about completing assigned tasks. They have a higher level of person-job fit, and they have personal well-being and flourishing. An example comes from a previous job that I had where my manager recognized some skills and interests that I had and invested time and training courses to help me improve my performance. The result was that I was more confident in my newly assigned work tasks and enjoyed the work experience because I was able to complete my assigned tasks. The next terminal value is discernment. In phase 1, Gregory, while studying Philippians 1, which is about the connection of maturity and unity, produced the principle: organizations that desire to achieve organizational maturity that leads to sustainable and productive growth should foster an atmosphere of unity where diversity of ideas and cultures are honored and sought. And while studying Philippians 4:4, which was about connection of maturity and constructive thinking, produced the following principle: organizations that desire to achieve organizational maturity and leads to sustainable and productive growth should foster a positive emotional and mental atmosphere where members are purposeful and constructive in their thinking. In phase 1, May and Henson, while studying John 13:1 to 20, which is about the last of Jesus' teaching to the apostles, developed 7 principles that include organizations with cultures of vulnerability create trusting environments where risk-taking is encouraged. Organizations with cultures of vulnerability create environments of camaraderie and communication. Ventura, in phase 2, after combining Gregory's and May and Henson's principles, developed the principle of leaders practice discernment. Ventura, after her qualitative study, developed the following scale development item: my leader invites employees to share in decision-making. Dr. Gilbert and I in Phase 3 values coded the principles and the scale development item as a terminal value of discernment. According to Traufer, discernment is the end state in which people have and exhibit keen insight and good judgment. Traufer et al. Went on to say that this is a part of wisdom. Wisdom, according to Scott, refers to sagacity, insight, and good judgment as to what one should do in a given situation, in the light of human values and goals. The outcome, where discernment is a terminal value, results in people sensing being valued, being included in decision-making, trusted by managers and other employees, and having personal well-being and flourishing. An example comes from an interviewee that I interviewed during one of my research studies. I asked her to tell me an experience involving discernment suggested in her answer to the interview question. That person described a friend of hers who was quiet and introverted, but very intelligent and perceptual. The interviewee that I talked with said she would ask others in their work group to contribute to a problem-solving session, and then she would specifically ask her introverted friend for her thoughts. The introverted friend's comments were always spot on, according to the interviewee. As leaders, we need to recognize and invite organizational members with maturity and constructive thinking to share their wisdom and discernment. That's the end of this video. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.